Hello and welcome to my Linux installation guide. This will cover 25 distros, how to install each of them, how to install alongside Windows if you want to. But first, let's go over some general installation steps that will apply no matter what distro you're using. So, let's make some installation media. If you're absolutely certain what distro you want to use, you can just plug your USB into a Windows machine. Open Rufus, which can be downloaded from rufus.ie. Select your disk image, which you can download from wherever. Let's just go with this one. Then, I would just go for MBR for BIOS or UEFI, because that way it can be booted on either type. But this video will cover Intel or AMD 64-bit UEFI systems, which just covers most systems in current day. And then there's some other options, as in what do you want to call it, what file system do you want to use for the ESP. If you don't know what to do, I would just leave all of these on the default settings and then hit start. Or if you want to boot multiple distros, then you'll need either a high-capacity USB drive or just an SSD like I do, hooked up to a USB connector. You'll want to plug that in, and make sure it's stood like that, because my USB ports are a bit high up. And pretend I haven't already done this about a year ago. You're going to want to open Ventoy 64-bit, and then, and then select the drive. You can just press install if there's nothing on the drive that you don't mind losing, but optionally you can just do a non-destructive install, which I apparently have forgotten how to do. There it is at the bottom. You could just hit that if you want to keep the files that are already on there. And then you can just put your disk image files directly on the drive without flashing them, and it will provide you a menu when you boot from that drive to select a disk image file to load. So, for this video, I will either be installing off this Ventoy SSD with my Dell Vostro 3591 from about 4 or 5 years ago, which runs basically the same if you bought a laptop or a computer in the current year, or if I have a distro that I just couldn't fit on this SSD because it's only 128 gigs, I'll just use a virtual machine. But yeah, I won't be recording the screen like this. Instead, I will be using a capture card so you can more accurately see what I'm doing. And if you're installing alongside Windows, you will need to disable BitLocker, otherwise you'll probably be locked out of Windows as soon as you boot into anything else or change firmware settings. But if you know your recovery key, or you plan to not use Windows with Linux, you can ignore this step. So, first of all, open the Run menu by pressing the Windows key and R, and type in WinVer. And then, if your edition is Windows, well, it would be 10 or 11 usually, but if it's Pro or Education, if it's anything other than Basic or Home, then you can go into the Control panel by typing Control into the Run menu, go into System and Security, BitLocker Drive Encryption, and make sure that, especially on your main system drive, which is the C drive, BitLocker is turned off. On some systems where BitLocker is pre-installed, it will say waiting for activation, in which case you'll have to turn it on and then off again. So yeah, just make sure BitLocker is off, unless you know your BitLocker key and can get into it even if it activates. And if you're running Windows Basic or Home Edition, then there should just be an option in the settings, which is a limited version of BitLocker called device encryption, and you can just turn that off. And I will be doing these distros in order from easiest to hardest. And this isn't just based on how easy or hard it is to install, even though that is one of the factors, but also on how well known it is and how much support is available if you do encounter problems. And now I'll just color code the names of all these distros to show you what family they're in. If a distro has an asterisk next to it, it means it's the parent distro, and anything the same color as the parent, if you don't have any luck with forums for the particular distro, you can just go to forums for its parent distro and likely solve any issues you have. And if I haven't colored something in, it means that it's just independent and doesn't have any parent or child distros that are on this list. Oh, and one more thing, it's kind of a bad idea to install Windows and Linux on the same drive. If you can, take out the drive that you have Windows installed on. So, now what we're going to do is change firmware settings. So what you want to do is power on your device and immediately start spamming the BIOS key. Now I'm going to display a list of BIOS keys on the screen now, but for me it's F2, so what you want to do is look for the boot options and secure boot section, and sometimes secure boot might be under security. And then in boot options you can see I don't have any boot options other than my Ventoy SSD, but then apparently it's just not here. System configuration, I think it's in enable USB boot support for me. So it'll either be in a boot options or general configuration section to allow USB booting if it's not allowed already, and then you go into security or secure boot and make sure that secure boot is off. For some systems it might let you do what I do now, which lets you put secure boot in deployed or audit mode, but it's better to just turn it off, because switching it from deployed to audit mode can cause problems with BitLocker, even if you know what key you're using. So then you're going to want to exit and save changes, and then you'll want to spam your boot menu key, which is usually F12, but again, I'll display another list on screen. Well, sometimes it does take a while to restart, but there we go, it's preparing the boot menu. And, well, for me, the Ventoy drive is the only boot option I have available, but for most people there would be some other main drives above the USB device. So now I'm going to boot from this and install some distros. So yeah, you can see in the Ventoy drive I just have all of my disk image files. So first one we're going to do is EndeavourOS. So boot into it, gives you a little menu, and if you're using NVIDIA drivers then you can select the NVIDIA option, but I'm not, so I'm just going to boot it into the normal setting. Yeah, this is just the Linux boot screen. Well, not really Linux doing it, it's systemd, the init system that most distros use, but like, yeah. Some distros take quite a while to boot depending on what system stuff they have to initialize. If you don't have an Ethernet cable, it will just give you a pop-up saying no internet connection found. Now you can either open your network manager or do an offline install. I will open the network manager, and for some reason it just doesn't give you the regular network manager, so in that case it will just bring up the EndeavourOS installer. Now, because I'm using the capture card, it's causing a bit of weirdness with not having the regular laptop screen, but normally there will be a taskbar down here, and you'd be able to connect to Wi-Fi from this menu. So I'm just going to do an offline install and click Start the Installer, and you can only have the KDE Plasma as your desktop environment. It will offer others, but I would just recommend KDE Plasma for its beginner friendliness and customizability if you don't know which one to pick. There's also GNOME or GNOME for a more Mac-like feel, but those are the main two that I'd recommend. Yeah, offline. And now it's starting Calamares, however you pronounce that, which is the install wizard that most distributions will use. So it will ask you to select your language. I'm going to put British English, United Kingdom, because that is me. And then it asks you to select time zone, and closest place to my time zone is London. Next. And then you can select your keyboard layout if you want. I have the default UK keyboard layout, so that's fine. And then it lets you pick a bootloader. So systemd boot is more minimal, but grub is more customizable. I'm going to go with systemd boot just because it's the default and it's more minimal, so faster on this pretty slow machine. And then select storage device, yeah, this Samsung SSD, picture a P210, that's the Ventoy drive, and it just won't, if you're booted off the Ventoy drive and try to install onto the Ventoy drive, it won't let you write to that. So if nothing happens, it means you've selected the wrong drive. So I'm going to select the 240GB SSD, erase disk, then you can select swap, which is a little bit of extra memory on your disk. And I'm just going to do swap with Hibernate, then select your file system. If you're not sure, just do ext4, and you can also encrypt your system if you want, but I won't. Next, what's your full name? So then you just get to configure your username, then your login name, which is just a shorter version, but most distros use a display manager, so you don't have to worry about that. Name your device, choose a password. I'm going to choose a really secure password, the letter H. And you can also log in automatically without asking for the password, and use the same password for the administrator or root account. Next, it gives you a summary of what you're going to do, then you can just hit install, gives you another warning, install now, and now you wait. As you can see, all done. And you can either keep just using the live environment for whatever reason if you wanted to do that, or you can restart immediately, so let's do that. And now, here's the boot menu, just let it boot automatically. And it does the epic hacker typing. I don't know if you guys can hear, but my dog has decided to join me in my room. What do you have to say about free and open source software? She huffed at me. It's quite rude of her. And yeah, you can see we're now in the environment. And yeah, no internet connection. But you can see this would have been in the live environment, except we couldn't see it because of how my capture card worked. But now there's some after install tasks where you can update your mirror list, update your packages, or change your display manager, wallpaper, download more wallpapers. There's just a bunch of stuff you can do. Or you could just click don't show me anymore. I remember. So yeah, that was EndeavourOS. Let's go on to the next distro. So our next distro is Fedora, and if you boot Fedora in normal mode, it creates a kind of weird boot entry thing. So what we're going to do is boot it in grub2 mode, and that way it provides us with a normal grub menu instead of creating a boot entry. So then it's going to boot, test this media and start Fedora Workstation live. Give us a little boot screen. And then we get the GNOME or GNOME Fedora Live environment. So we can either explore this or install Fedora, which is what I'm going to do now. After a bit of loading, it will say initializing. Get me to select a language, this one, and surprisingly, and this installer, so next, yep, that disk, and we don't want to install alongside the previous one, so we use the entire disk. Next, we don't want to encrypt. Review and install. Understand that all existing data will be erased, and then we can erase data and install. And it's done. To continue using it, reboot your system, and then we can just exit to live desktop, go to the power menu up here, and restart. Yeah. And then it says login. Next, typing that one, even though I set my region to United Kingdom, I have no clue what it's. Wi-Fi, don't need any Wi-Fi. Privacy, no, and no. Time zone, it doesn't ask click on a map for some reason. London in Kiribati, my favourite. London, England, United Kingdom. Why is it so far down the list? 12:46, that is the current time. Next. Third-party repositories. Sure. Next. About you. Love how it changes the colour of my profile picture every time I type. Next, password, super secure password. I don't care if my password is weak. Next. All done. Start using. And we're here. And if you want, you can take the tour, but I'm not going to. So yeah, that's Fedora. Next distro time. Okay, this one is Kubuntu, Kubuntu, however you say that. And like many Ubuntu-based distros, this has an OEM install feature where you can just install the base system on a device, and then whoever you give the device to can set up their own account and stuff on the next startup. But for all of the ones with the OEM installed, we're just going to be doing a normal install, because this guide is if you're installing for yourself. So try and install Kubuntu, And then we have this little glowy Kubuntu logo. And then you can select either try or install, but first select your language. And for some reason it takes a while to change the language on some systems and can make the screen go blank a few seconds. So install Kubuntu. Next. And then yep, that's the right time zone, right keyboard layout. Now here you can either choose a full installation, a normal installation, or a minimal installation. For the sake of saving time, I'm going to choose minimal installation, and you can also download and install updates following the installation, which I'm not going to do, again, purely to save time. So next, and again, all these options, I'm going to do erase disk. You can choose your swap and your format, just leave it as these if you're not sure what to pick. Next, put your name, your username, computer, password, choose a really secure password, like I totally just did, and I'm going to choose login automatically without a password. And it gives you a summary of what changes are going to be made, and you can just hit install. And now you wait. And then, all done, you can either switch to the live environment or restart immediately. So let's do that. And this happens with all Ubuntu-based distributions. It will ask you to remove the installation medium and then press enter. You don't have to, but you can. So I'm not going to because this is one of the ones I'm installing with a VM. So just press enter. And we have a little login animation. And we're in. What is this supposed to be? For some reason, it might just be because of the version I'm using, but there's a broken shortcut here. It's just for the web browser. That's just because I selected minimal installation. So yeah, that's Kubuntu. On to the next distro. This is Linux Mint. This is probably going to be a really popular one because it's one of the most recommended beginner distros. And again, because it's Ubuntu based, there's an OEM install option. I explained that for Kubuntu, but we're just going to start it normally. And we're now in the live environment. You can connect to Wi-Fi if you want, or you can just, there's the installation media there, shows them on the desktop immediately, and we're just going to go ahead and select install Linux Mint. Then it asks us to select our language, asks us to select a keyboard layout, you can connect to Wi-Fi if you want again, but I'm not going to just to save time. You can install multimedia codecs, and I would recommend doing that, because you can see it's required to play some video formats and render some websites, but again, I won't to save time. Unknown partitions that are in use. Nope, because that is the SSD that I'm booting off, so unmounting that would not be very good. So erase disk and install Linux Mint, and then it lets us select a disk, that is the correct one, and then we can just hit install now. And then it tells you what partitions are going to be formatted. Again, you can just hit continue. It asks you to select a time zone, which for me would be about there. And then again, continue. Your name, your computer's name, your username, your password, and confirm your password. And you can also choose to log in automatically or encrypt your home folder. And then continue for the last time. And now, again, you just wait. And then, installation complete. You can continue testing or restart now, which is what I'm going to do. And again, because it's Ubuntu based, remove the installation media and press enter. You don't actually have to do this, but you can if you want. So let's just press enter. And here we are. Welcome to your new operating system. And I'm not going to show this dialog that starts up, but I'm just going to go through the little guide that it shows you on your first startup. You can change your desktop colors, make regular backups or snapshots, manage any drivers, multimedia codecs, update settings, additional software that you have to install, or change your firewall. Then documentation, if you want to read that, any help, or go to the IRC chat room, and then you could always contribute towards Linux Mint yourself. So yeah, that is Linux Mint. On to the next distro. Okay, the next one is Lubuntu, Lubuntu, however you want to pronounce that. And again, because it's Ubuntu based, you could do an OEM install, but we're going to select try or install Lubuntu. Then, again, you can select your language, which takes a few seconds and might cause the screen to flicker. And then you can either try or install Ubuntu, but I'm going to select install. And then, yeah, correct language. Normally, based off what language you select, it just guesses your region, time zone, etc. automatically. So yeah, these are all correct. And like with Kubuntu, you can do full installation, normal or minimal. And again, like with Kubuntu, I'm going to do minimal just to save time. There's also an option to download and install updates, but I'm going to do that again just to save time. And then you can do any of these, but I'm going to erase the disk, and if you're not sure what to do with these, just leave them as their defaults. Next, put my name, username, the name of the device, super very secure password, and I'm going to choose to log in automatically without a password. Gives you a summary of what's going to happen, and install. And now, again, you just wait. And then, all done, we can either go into the live environment or restart now, which is what I'm going to do. And like all Ubuntu based distros, it's going to say remove the install media and press enter. You don't actually have to remove it, but you can if you want, so I'm just going to press enter. And then we are in Lubuntu. It will ask you to install updates or configure power management if you want to. But yeah, if you do install this distro, it's designed to be lightweight, so it should run well on pretty much anything. And on to the next one. Our next distro is Manjaro. So on the boot menu, you can set your time zone, your keyboard layout, and your language and localization before you even boot, and then you can either boot with open source or proprietary drivers. Proprietary is more useful if you have an NVIDIA card, but if not, just go open source. It has to load the desktop environment. Once it does that, it shows you a little welcome screen, and because you're using live media, if you toggle this, it doesn't do anything, it still launches at start even if you turn it off. But there's some documentation support project if you want to read any of that before you install, or you could just launch the installer immediately. And then, despite having set all of your locale and stuff before you booted, the installer still can't tell what one you're trying to use, and doesn't appear to want to scroll back up, so I'll have to do that manually. There we go. And next, select your time zone, there. Skip one, yeah, keyboard layout, and then again, you can select any of these. I'm just going to do erase disk, but if you're not sure about these two settings, just leave them as the defaults. Then next again, then your name, your username, your device name, a super secure password, and I'm going to log in automatically without asking for the password, and then you can set a different password for the administrator or root account, or just use the same one, which is what I'm going to do. And then you can choose an office suite. If you are going to choose one, I just recommend this one, purely because I haven't used the other one, but I'm not going to install an office suite. And it gives you a summary, final box, and now you just have to wait. All done. You can either continue using the live environment or restart immediately, which is what I'm going to do. And then we get another welcome screen with all the same stuff, except the launch installer is replaced with applications. And that is Manjaro. On to the next distro. And our next distro is Ubuntu. Now you can do an OEM install if you want, but I'm not going to, so let's just try and install Ubuntu. And then we can try and install Ubuntu and also select our language, and I'm just going to select install. Then select your keyboard layout. You can connect to Wi-Fi if you want, I'm not going to. And you can either do a normal or minimal installation, and I'm just going to do a minimal one to save time. If you are connected to the internet, you will have the option to download updates when installing, and also install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware, and some media formats. I would select that, but I won't, again, purely to save time. So continue, then you can either erase disk and install, or something else, and select the disk. It's selected the correct one, and just press install now. Then it shows you how it's going to format it, continue, then it asks you to select your time zone, not Paris, That's about right, even though where I clicked is nowhere near London. Then, your name, your computer's name, username, super secure password, and you can make it log in automatically without your password, which I am going to do. And now, you just wait. And then installation complete. Interestingly, unlike other distros, it doesn't give you the option to go to the live environment, only to restart. And then you can remove the installation medium if you want, it's not required, and then just hit enter to restart. And because Ubuntu is a distro that has what we like to call the combo rot, it asks you if you want to enable Ubuntu Pro. So we're just not going to do that. Then again, combo rot, it asks you to send system info, which no. And then location services, you can just choose that if you want. And then you're ready to go. You can use software to install apps that won't load because they're not connected to the internet. And that is Ubuntu. On to the final beginner distro. And our final beginner distro is Xubuntu, Xubuntu. Again, no clue how you actually pronounce this, but surprisingly, despite being Ubuntu based, there is no OEM install. But we're not doing an OEM install, so just try or install. And then you can just click the icon that says install Xubuntu, and then whatever version. Then it will just say preparing. Choose your language, your keyboard layout, connect to the internet, and you can either do interactive or automated installation, but you will need a pre-written install script for automated, so I would just go with interactive. And you can either do desktop or minimal. Desktop has more stuff, but I'm just going to do minimal to save time. And again, I would recommend to do these two, but I won't, just to save time. And then you can either install alongside whatever's already there, configure manually, or erase disk and install. Then your name, your computer's name, your username, super secure password, and require my password to log in. If you turn it off, it will just log you in automatically. Next, you just select your time zone, it gives you a summary, and then you just wait. And then, installed and ready to use, you can either continue testing in the live environment, or restart now, which is what I'll do. If it doesn't reboot, you just need to press enter on the keyboard. For some reason, it just doesn't show the press enter to reboot message. And that is Xubuntu, the last beginner distro. Now on to the medium ones. Okay, our first medium distribution is Alma Linux, and you can either test the media and install, or just go straight to the installer. Testing the media, if you're not using a VM like I am, takes about an extra minute or two, but ensures that the USB or DVD, etc. that you're using is fine. But since I'm using a VM, I will just go straight to the installer. And then you get the screen which appears grey for a few seconds, but after that the installer menu loads in just fine. So then you select your language, and then, because it uses the Anaconda installer which Fedora used to use, you just set up everything at once and then hit begin installation. So the main things you'll want to set up are localization, which has been done for me, your network if you have to, and then for the disk selection, select the disk you want to use, and I would do automatic storage configuration unless you want to mess with partitions, and select free up space by removing or shrinking existing partitions to clean the disk, and then just press delete on the main disk to delete all of the partitions on there and use that disk for installation. Then you can configure the root account. You can either disable the root account or enable the root account. For those of you that don't know, the root account is basically the administrator account for Linux. If you log into root, you can do basically anything. So I'm going to enable the root account and again do a super secure password. And if your password is really super ultra secure like mine is, it's so secure that you have to press done twice. And you can also allow SSH login with the root password, but most people won't need to do that. Then you can press done twice, then user creation, put your full name, your username, decide if you want to make your user an admin user, and you can check whether you want to require a password. I'm not going to, but you probably should, and then you just hit begin installation and wait. And then it just says complete. Alma Linux is now successfully installed and ready for you to use. Go ahead and reboot to start using it. And it also gives you a link to the EULA if you want to read that. Then just hit reboot. And it brings you the login screen. You can just click on your user and it logs you in. Welcome to Alma Linux. If you want to learn your way around, check out the tour. You can take the tour if you want. But yeah, that's Alma Linux. On to the next one. Our next distribution is Archcraft. And you might not be expecting me to say this in a Linux video, but I would like to issue a jump scare warning, because when you boot into the media for these distros, they can beep pretty loudly, and this laptop has, luckily for me, very loud internal speakers, so I'll just let you guys hear the beep. Yep. And then it lets you choose your drivers for each entry on the menu, and then you can boot that one. If you're not sure, I just recommend the default option. Oh, I just remembered. This one has a media player. Now this is a proper tutorial video. Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to play that during the whole installation. Anyway, it gives you a little welcome screen. There are 2 installers that you can launch. However, I just go with Calamari since I never use the other one, and I know that this one is good. Welcome to the Archcraft installer. Select your language. Then, next, select your time zone. not there, there. Select your keyboard layout, and then you can select your window manager. If you're not sure, I just go with OpenBox or both, but BSPWM, BSP window manager, whatever, both are good. Then partitions, make sure you've selected the right disk, and I'm going to do erase disk. And if you're not sure about either of these, just leave them as the default. I'm going to do swap with hibernate, so you can hibernate your system, and there's a checkbox to encrypt it if you want to. Next, users, enter your name, your username, your device name, and a super secure password. And you can choose to use the same password for the administrator account, and I'm going to check login automatically without asking for the password. It gives you a summary, install, and now you wait. And then, all done. You can either continue using the live environment or restart immediately, which is what I'll do. And then it gives you a little boot menu, and it gives you a hello page where you can view the wiki, tutorials, or the gallery. And that is Archcraft. On to the next distro. Okay, our next distro is Artix. And like Manjaro, you can set your time zone, keyboard layout, and language just right from the boot menu, which is pretty cool. And then there are two boot options, whether you're booting from a CD, DVD, or disk image, or whether you're booting from a USB or hard drive. So I don't know what the difference between them is, but I'm just going to do this one because I'm booting from an SSD. It loads the desktop environment and gives you the welcome center. Welcome to the Artix Linux operating system running KDE Plasma. So what you'll want to do is just press skip on this and then double click the install Artix shortcut. Online installation is experimental, so I recommend doing an offline install, especially if you're not connected to Wi-Fi, like I won't. And then you select your language, click next, select your time zone, click next again, keyboard layout, partitions. Now this one for some reason doesn't have an erase disk option, so I'm just gonna replace this partition here with my Artix installation, but if you have a blank disk, it should work fine. And then, yeah, the EFI system partition, that's the correct one. So then, next, put your name, your username, your device name, super secure password. You can select whether users are required to have strong passwords, log in automatically without asking for passwords, and to use the same password for the administrator account. Now, I don't know if replacing the partition instead of erasing the disk will cause bootloader issues. I guess we'll find out. It gives you a summary, you can hit install, and now, once again, you just wait. Then, all done. You can either continue using the live environment or restart immediately. I'll do that, and then just hit done. And then you can just select one of those or let it boot automatically. It didn't cause any bootloader weirdness like I thought it would. And you'll notice that because this is designed to be lightweight and doesn't use systemd, it's very quick to boot. Then it gives you the welcome screen again, so we could go through that, access the internet, and funnily enough the Wi-Fi menu isn't there, powerful when needed, and then you can select your data usage. By default it's disabled completely, and then it gives you a final enjoy it screen. So yeah, that was Artix. On to the next distro. Okay, our next distro is Bazzite. And when you download Bazzite, then you can configure it to have drivers for your video card, and there's even a version for VMware or VirtualBox specifically, which is the one I'm using, but there's no major noticeable difference between versions, apart from the desktop environment you choose, where you have a choice of two. So, like Alma, you can either install or test and install. If you're not using a virtual machine, I'd recommend doing test and install, although with Bazzite specifically, test and install can be buggy at times, but otherwise I just do regular install. So then, select your language, and then you could do your localization, time and date, etc. Then select the disk you want to install on, and the storage configuration you can either do automatic, custom, or advanced custom. I'd recommend doing automatic and to erase existing partitions. Check free up space by removing or shrinking existing partitions. Just select the main disk itself that you want to install on, delete, and then reclaim space. Then you can set up your network if you want to. User creation. You put your full name, your username. Select whether you want the user to be an administrator, or whether you need to require a password to use this account, which I'm going to uncheck. And then you just hit begin installation and wait. And complete. Bazzite is now successfully installed and ready for you to use. Go ahead and reboot to start using it. Then you can either continue boot or any of these other ones, but I'm just going to select continue boot. And then it brings you to the login screen. And it immediately starts Steam and updates it, because this distro is built for gaming and also the heaviest distro by far. The install image for this is about 8 GB, and the rest are around 3 on average. Welcome to Bazzite. You can install additional applications. I'm not going to install any of these, although I definitely recommend this one, because you can remotely control Android devices if they're plugged into your device. And then it has another setting up Bazzite screen, and then you can just hit next. System configuration, you can configure these if you want. I'm just going to set all of these to off, just to save time. Then complete, then all done. And that is Bazzite. On to the next distro. Our next distro is Garuda, which for some reason, if you're using Ventoy, booting in normal mode just freezes, so you have to use grub2 mode. And this is another one where you can set your time zone, language and keyboard layout before you boot. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then you can either boot with open source drivers or boot with proprietary drivers, which is better for NVIDIA cards, but I'm going to boot with open source. And welcome to Garuda Linux. Hello, the default name for the install media, and there's a bunch of different tools for if you want to repair your system or connect to the network, but I'm just going to go straight into the installer. Welcome to the Garuda Linux Soaring installer. It's not connected to the internet, but we don't need to worry about that. So set your language, next, location, keyboard layout, and then disk configuration. I have the right disk selected. I'm going to do erase disk, and if you're not sure about swap, just leave it as no swap, but I'm going to do swap with hibernate. And then you can select your full name, your username, your device name, your super secure password, and you can also log in automatically without asking for the password or use the same password for the administrator account. Then it gives you a summary, install, and now again you just have to wait. And all done. You can either continue in the live environment or restart now. I'll just restart now. And it's giving me a display option because I'm using the capture card. And then we get a little welcome screen. Waiting for an internet connection. I guess the welcome screen only shows up once you have an internet connection, but it just provides a bunch of beginner tasks you can do. So yeah, that's Garuda. On to the next distro. Our next distro is LMDE, or Linux Mint Debian Edition. So let's go ahead and start it. And Wi-Fi networks are available, so you can connect to Wi-Fi if you want. But let's just go straight to install LMDE. Now, LMDE is basically just Linux Mint, but instead of being built off of Ubuntu, it's built off of Debian, which makes it a bit faster, among other things, and the installer is also completely different. So, which language would you like to use? I'm going to go with that. Time zone is not 7:53. For me, it is 12:53, even though down here it says 11:53 because it's just wrong. Then keyboard layout, then your name, your device name, your username, password, and you can choose to log in automatically or require a password, and you could also encrypt your home folder if you like. Next, automated installation or manual partitioning, then select the disk, and you can also select to encrypt the disk and fill it with random data if you'd want to do that. So next, this will delete all data on that disk, I know. And then you can select where to install the bootloader to, Next, it gives you a summary, and then just hit install, and you wait. The installation is now complete. Do you want to restart your computer to use the new system? If you say no, it will just let you continue using the live environment. So let's go ahead and restart. And despite being Debian based instead of Ubuntu based, it has the remove the installation media message, even though it does nothing. And unlike normal Linux Mint, it actually has a boot menu, which is pretty cool. And welcome to Linux Mint. You can uncheck show this dialog at startup. And let's go. Here you can change your desktop colors, take snapshots, manage drivers, settings and updates. There's some documentation that you can read if you want, some help forums in the IRC chat room, and you can contribute to Linux Mint if you want. And that was LMD. On to the next distro. The next one is MX Linux. And this one, first, it lets you set your keyboard language and time zone. So English, that one. And then it auto sets the other two based on what language you pick. And then you can go back to main menu once you've confirmed your choices. And you can check the integrity of the live media if you want. And then you can just start MX Linux. Then it gives you a welcome screen where you can just do all of these. And it gives you the passwords for the demo user and the demo root user. So let's go ahead and click install MX Linux. Then you can either customize the disk layout or do a regular install using the entire disk. And you can either encrypt or enable hibernation support if you want to. And next, it says what it's going to do. Start, and what's interesting about MX Linux is you can configure anything while it's installing. So you can just set up all of these, you can't leave any of these blank, you can just make something up if these two aren't important. Then next, set your locale and your time. Then default login name. And password. And then you can enable or disable the root or administrator account and have a password for them too. Have an auto login, or save the changes you made during the live desktop, if any. And next, username cannot contain characters or spaces. Right, this is the username for the default login, not the full name. So we can just do that. And hit next. And then you can just wait for the rest of the installation to finish, which, because that's what it does first, shouldn't take too long. In fact, I might not have to speed up the footage and editing like I have with the others. Then you can choose to automatically reboot the system when the installer is closed, and then just click Finish. Then it gives you a little boot animation. And also a login animation. Then it gives you another welcome screen where you can do basically the same stuff or take a tour. And that is MX Linux. On to the next distro. Okay, our next distribution is Rocky Linux. So again, you can either install or test and install, And if you're not using a VM, I would do test and install, but since I am using a VM, I'll just do install. Then you get this green screen, and then welcome to Rocky Linux. Select your language. Then you can select your localization, software source, software selection, and then for partitioning, select the disk. You can either do automatic or custom storage configuration, and check free up space by removing or shrinking existing partitions. Then done. Then select the entire disk, delete, and then press reclaim space. And then for your root account, you can either disable or enable it, which is basically the administrator account. It says what it does up here. And then I'm going to enable it with a really secure password. In fact, so secure that I have to press done twice to confirm it. Then create a user account, put the full name, the username, and then you can either add administrator privileges to the account. You can also require a password to use the account. I'm not going to. And then, once you've set up everything, you can just hit begin installation, and now you just have to wait. And then, complete. Rocky Linux is now successfully installed and ready for you to use. Go ahead and reboot to start using it. There's a link to the EULA if you want to read it, and then you can just hit reboot. And then you get to the login screen, select your account, and welcome to Rocky Linux. You can take the tour if you want, but I'll just skip it. And that is Rocky Linux. Onto the final medium distro. Okay, our final medium distro is ZorinOS. Now you can either try or install, do it in safe graphics, or do it with NVIDIA drivers, and I'm just going to do it normally. Then it just has to check the MD5 sums of all the files. It takes about a minute or two, and I would recommend doing it, but you could always press Ctrl-C to skip it. Then you can either try or install ZorinOS. I'm just going to go and install it, and you can always select your language first. Then select your keyboard layout. You can connect to Wi-Fi if you want to, but you don't have to. And then you can also install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware, and choose to opt out of the census, which just makes it so that the developers don't collect your data. I'm not going to install the additional software, just to save time. Then you can do any of these. I'm going to erase disk and install. Then make sure you have selected the correct disk, and then hit install now. Continue, and then select your time zone. Then your name, your device name, username, your password, and you can choose to log in automatically or require your password. And now, you just wait. Then installation is complete. You need to restart in order to use the new installation. So go ahead and restart now. Then you can remove the installation medium if you want, you don't have to, and then just hit enter. And now you're in ZorinOS. It plays a jingle, and then you can start the tour if you want. I'm not going to. And yeah, that's ZorinOS, the final medium distro. Now onto the advanced distros. Okay, our first advanced distro is Debian, and this is another one that I have to issue a kind of jump scare warning for, because it's another one that beeps when you first boot into it. So you have multiple options: graphical install, text-based install, or something else. I personally find text-based install quicker, but for the video I'm going to do graphical install because you get to use a cursor, and most people would find that easier. Then you select your language, your location, your keyboard layout, the text network hardware. Now I'm using the network installer version, which I would recommend over the CD installer version. And then if there are some components of your machine that it can't find firmware for, you can load it from removable media if you have it, but if not, you can just continue anyway. And if it's not, it asks you to select a device. Then you can choose a network, select the security. If you don't know, then if it's this, it doesn't have a password, and if it does have a password, it's this. So continue, and then just enter the password. And hit continue. Then it makes sure that it is properly connected to the network if you used Wi-Fi. Then you can put your host name or your machine name. Domain name, most networks don't need a domain name, but if it does and you know your domain name, you can put it in. If not, just leave it blank. Then you can put the password to the root account. You can leave this blank, but if you do so, the root account will be disabled. I'm just going to put a super secure 1-character password. Continue. Then the full name for your user, the username for your account. Then again, super secure password. Then it detects the disk on your device, starts the partitioner. Then you can either use the largest continuous free space if one of your disks already has free space on it where there is no partition. Use the entire disk, use the entire disk and set up LVM, or use the entire disk and set up encrypted LVM, or just do your own thing manually. Most people would want to choose use entire disk. Select the disk you want to install on. Then you can either have a separate home partition, a separate home, var and temp partition, but I would just do all files in one partition because it makes everything less confusing. Then make sure you're happy with everything. and you can finish partitioning and write changes to the disk, or undo changes if you realise you made a mistake. Then it asks you to confirm again, formats the disks, installs the base system, then select the region for your network mirror. Then you can select an individual one. I would just recommend doing the top one. Then HTTP proxy if you need one. Most people don't, so you can just leave it blank. Then you can choose to participate in the package usage survey. I would just do no. Then you can select all of the packages you want to install. The desktop environment, if you don't select this, it would just give you a terminal interface. Now for the desktop environment, for a Mac-like experience you can do GNOME or GNOME. For a Windows-like experience you could do KDE Plasma. Now this is by far the most customizable, so I would recommend choosing this one. And for lightweight you can do LXDE, LXQT or XFCE. And then Cinnamon, also for Windows-like, slightly more lightweight than KDE Plasma. And then these two are just other ones. Then you can also do standard system utilities, which would just install some additional packages like partition managers, etc. And a web or SSH server if you wish to do that, but I won't do any of those just to save time. Then it just retrieves the files and installs all the software. Then installation is complete. Make sure to remove the installation media so that you can boot into the new system. You can do that if you want, and then just select continue to reboot. Then it gives you a boot menu, and then you could just do the top one or do advanced options. Then it brings up the login screen, so you can go ahead and log in. And you are in Debian. Depending on what desktop environment you installed, it might ask you to take a tour of the system, but in my case it didn't. So yeah, that is Debian. On to the next distro. Our next distro is Kali Linux. Now before we start, I know that there are people who just hear Kali Linux is used for hacking, and so just run it on their main machine, but this distro is built specifically for penetration testing. Don't install it if you don't know what you're doing, and definitely don't install it for daily use. Now I've gotten that out of the way, you can just boot in normal mode. It's another one that beeps, and you can either have a graphical install, a text-based install, or some other stuff. Then you can select your installation language, your location, your keyboard layout, then if it doesn't find any firmware for some components on your machine, you can load it from additional media if you have it, or you can just continue anyway. Then it detects if you're connected to the internet already via Ethernet cable. Then you can connect to the network via Ethernet or Wi-Fi. I'm going to do it via Wi-Fi. Then you select your network. Select your security type. The top one is no password. The bottom one is it does have a password. Then enter the password. Then it just checks that it is properly connected. Then you can put your host name, your domain name. Most people don't have one, so you can just leave it blank, but if you know what it is, you can put it in. Then you can put the full name for your user. Your username, your password, which, because this is built for penetration testing, you want to make extra secure. Then it detects any disks on your device, starts the partitioner. Then you can either, if there's already a free space on the disk where there are no partitions, you can use that. Use the entire disk, set up an LVM, an encrypted LVM, or manually do your own thing, but most people will want to use the entire disk. Then select the disk to install it on. Then you can either have a separate home partition or a separate home, var, and temp partition, or all files in one partition, which I would recommend because it makes everything less confusing. Then it gives you a summary. You can either undo changes if you realise you made a mistake, or finish partitioning and write changes to the disk. It asks you to confirm the final time. And then it formats the partitions, installs the base system, then you can select your desktop environment, your collection of tools, either the top 10 most popular tools or the recommended tools. And for the desktop environment, you can either have XFCE as the default, which is the most lightweight, GNOME for a Mac-like experience, or KDE Plasma for a Windows-like experience, which is also the most customizable. And for the sake of saving time, I'm just going to have the 10 most popular tools, but if you're absolutely sure you know what you're doing with this distro, I would just recommend having all of them. Then it retrieves the files and installs the software. Installation is complete, and you can remove the installation media if you want, and then just hit continue to reboot. Then it gives you a boot menu. You can either boot normally or do advanced options. Then you can log in. And all of your epic hacker tools are up here. Make sure to just use this distro responsibly, because some people who know nothing about any of these tools just end up getting arrested for hacking their Starbucks Wi-Fi or something. So yeah, word of warning before you install this one. And that was Kali. On to the next distro. Our next distro is Mageia. I have no clue how to pronounce that. And you have 3 options: install, rescue, or memory test. So let's go ahead and install. Then it detects USB devices, including mass storage ones. Then loads the install program. Then you can select your language. You can accept or refuse the license agreement, although you have to accept it. select your keyboard layout, and then select your disk drive, and make sure that you have the correct one selected. Then you can either use the existing partitions on the disk, erase and use the entire disk, or have a custom disk partition layout. And then it warns you that all existing data will be lost on the drive that you're installing on. Then the following media have been found and will be used during install. If you have another installation medium to configure, you can do that. If not, you can just continue. And if not, then you can just enable any of these. I would recommend enabling both. Then you can choose your desktop environment, GNOME for a Mac-like experience, Plasma for a highly customizable Windows-like experience, or you can go with custom. And now you can just wait. Then you have to set the password for the root or administrator account. You can select your icon. There are quite a few. I'm just going to go with the purple one. Put your name, your login name, your password, and then in advanced you can select the shell, the user ID, or the group ID, add some extra tools. I would recommend enabling wheel because it will allow you to use commands such as su and sudo, as well as ntools to be able to configure the network, and adm and ctools, as that will just allow you access to a bunch of stuff. As a matter of fact, I would just recommend to enable all of them. And then you hit next. I forgot that this one has a password limit. So now my password is twice as strong. Then you can choose your monitor, and if you're not sure, just go with plug and play, so it should auto-detect it. And then you can configure your time zone, country, bootloader, user management, services, and then all of these. Now for the bootloader, you can actually choose which one of these you want to be your bootloader. And now I would just stick with grub to with a graphical menu, or you could also do refind or just grub with a text menu. And then your boot device, the delay before you boot into the main system, which I'm going to set to 0 so it boots into it automatically, and then a password if you need a boot password, and then some miscellaneous options. Then your bootloader configuration, you can do the default entry, have any other options while you're booting, probe for other OSs, installing /efi/boot, and then you can choose your video mode, and if it is there, then I'd just put it in 1080p, but it isn't, and you can also just select do not touch ESP or MBR, and next. It takes you back to the summary. You can hit next again. And then you have the opportunity to set up online media to install security updates, which will require you to connect to the internet. You can if you want, but I won't, to save time. And then congratulations, you've completed the installation and you can just hit reboot. And then it says welcome to localhost because I didn't set up a device name. Put in your username, your password, and you can also select your session or the desktop environment that it will use. And then just hit login. It plays a little jingle. Then you can either configure media sources, update MCC, install software, applications, your configuration, and more info. And yeah, that is however you pronounce this one. I'm going to go with Mageia. On to the next distro. Our next distro is NixOS. And you can either do normal, no mode set, copy to RAM, debug, and set some other settings before you boot. And then you get this screen, and because I'm using my capture card, it asks to switch. The system's not connected to the internet. So for NixOS, you do need to connect to the internet to be able to install. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. That one. Then it will give you an encryption error if you do that one. Forgot about that. So just do classic blowfish encrypted file. Then you can just do whatever password you want because this is for the live environment only and probably won't carry over to the actual installation, although you won't encounter this problem if you're using Ethernet. And then you select your language. Next, select your time zone. Next, keyboard layout, your name, your username, your password. You can select whether to require strong passwords or not, log in automatically without asking for the password, or to use the same password for the root or administrator account. Hit next. Then you can select a desktop environment. You can have GNOME or GNOME for a Mac-like experience, Plasma for a Windows-like by default and extremely customizable experience, Plasma 5, which is similar to Plasma but slightly faster and with a few less features, XFCE and LXQT for a lightweight desktop, Pantheon for another Mac-like experience, Cinnamon for another Windows-like experience, Mate, which is sort of lightweight, if you want to use that, Enlightenment, which again, pretty similar circumstances as Mate, Budgie, which is also Windows-like, Deepin, which is a mix between Windows and Mac-like, or you could always have no desktop environment and just use the command line. But I would personally recommend Plasma just for how customizable it is. So next, NixOS is fully open source, so it lets you allow or prohibit the use of software that isn't free and open source, like some NVIDIA and Wi-Fi firmware. So unless you really care about your free and open source software, you would just want to check this in case your graphics or Wi-Fi require those drivers. Then select the disk to install on. You can either erase disk or do manual partitioning. If you're not sure about this, just do no swap, but I'm going to do swap with Hibernate. It gives you a summary, and also move some of the window off screen. Then you can just hit install, and now you wait. All done, NixOS has been installed on your computer. You can either restart into the installed system or continue using the live environment. And then you can change every setting later except the bootloader. So I'm going to restart now. It gives you a boot menu, which is either boot into the OS or your UEFI settings. Then again, because I'm using the capture card, it asks me which screen to switch to, and that is NixOS. On to the next distro. Okay, our final advanced distro before we move on to the expert ones is OpenSUSE, or OpenSUSE, however you want to pronounce it. So you can either boot from hard disk, install, upgrade from a previous version of OpenSUSE or SUSE before they change the name, add more options, so we're just going to do installation. And now you're in the installer, then it just detects your hardware and network configuration, adds repositories if it needs to, and then you can select your keyboard layout, and then there's a license agreement which you have to accept. Then you can choose which network device to connect to, either Ethernet or Wi-Fi. So I'm going to do Wi-Fi. And then you can select which desktop environment you want, which you can either have XFCE for lightweight, GNOME for Mac-like, or KDE Plasma for highly customizable and Windows-like, which is what I would recommend if you're not sure. Or you can have a generic desktop with a reduced package set, or just a small set of packages built for servers with a command line interface. So once you've chosen that, hit next again. Then you can either do guided setup. It might auto detect the disk that you want to format automatically, but I would just recommend to do guided setup. Then to do with existing partitions on the disk you want to format, I would just do remove even if not needed for both. Then hit next, and you can enable LVM or disk encryption. Then your file system type. If you're not sure, I would just do ext4, but the default is betterfs. And if you want, you could also have a separate partition for your home directory, or a separate swap partition, and enlarge to the RAM size when you suspend. Then it will show you the updated changes, and then you can hit next again. And then you can select your time zone, which for me is already correct. Then your name, your username, your password, and you can use this password for the system administrator and enable automatic login. And you could also import users from a previous installation or skip user creation entirely. Then it will warn you if your password is super ultra secure like mine is, and then yes, really use this password. And then it gives you a final summary, and then you can just hit install. And then just asks you to confirm, so yes. And now, once again, you just wait. Then, once it's done, the system will reboot automatically after 10 seconds. And then it gives you a boot menu where you can either boot normally or do advanced options. And ahoy, this is OpenSUSE. You can either read the guide, documentation, get software, or support OpenSUSE. And yeah, it shows you the version, the architecture, and the desktop environment. And yeah, that is OpenSUSE. Onto the advanced distros. Okay, our first advanced distro, one that probably a lot of people will have just skipped to this for, is Arch Linux. And this is also another one where I have to issue a jump scare warning, if you want to call it that, because it beeps when you boot into it. Hopefully you saw the options, but I just hit enter immediately to go into the installation environment. But now you'll notice, oh no, we don't have an installer, we just have a command line. So this is one that requires about 4 commands. So, to connect to Wi-Fi, if you want to connect to Ethernet, then it does it automatically, so there's no need for this step if you're using Ethernet. But for Wi-Fi, you do iwctl station list, then it lists your Wi-Fi devices, and normally there will only be one. So for example, mine is called WLAN0. So then you're going to want to do iwctl station, then the name of that device, connect, and then the name of your home network or the network you want to connect to. And if you're not sure what it's called, then you can just either look at the networks menu on a nearby device, or just do iwctl station, the name of the device, and then get-networks. So I'm going to put in my network name. If it has a Wi-Fi password, it'll ask you to enter it. And I'll just clear it. So now, pacman -key -init. This sets up the live environment's package manager. And then you're going to want to make sure that both the Arch Linux keyring and the Arch installer are up to date. So pacman -S y Arch install and Arch Linux -keyring. Now, for some reason, installing packages to the live environment is a bit buggy, so for me it worked first try, but for some people it might say a key or key signature is corrupt. So in that case, you're just going to want to hit enter until the command finishes, and then run it a bunch of times until it works. So then, once you've done that, just type, my screen glitched a bit there, but just type Arch install, all one word. Then it checks the version. Then you can select your language, your keyboard layout, your locale language. If you're not sure, for example, ENGB is English Great Britain, ENUS is English United States, ENCA is English Canada. I would normally go with the regular version instead of the UTF-8 version, if you're not sure which one to do. Locale encoding, again, you can do UTF-8 or some others, but I just stick with UTF-8. So mirrors and repositories, you can select your mirror region to make package downloads faster. So for me it would be United Kingdom. You could have a custom server if you want to. Optional repositories, I would do multi-lib, but not testing, because packages from testing might break. And then if you want to, you can also add a custom repository. Then disk configuration, partitioning. Either you can use the pre-mounted configuration already on the disk, use a best effort default partition layout, or do manual partitioning. Then select the disk you want to install on, so for me it would be this one. Then select your file system. If you're not sure which one to do, I would just do ext4. Then you can choose whether to create a separate partition for your home directory. Then, if you want to, you can enable LVM or disk encryption. Then swap, you can choose whether or not to use swap. Bootloader, system deboot is UEFI only, as is EFI stub. EFI stub is the most basic, and system deboot is configurable but very lightweight. But if you're doing this on a non-UEFI system, then you'll only get grub and limine, so I would recommend just doing these two. Both are configurable, but grub is more easily configurable, looks better and is way more customizable, but takes a few seconds longer to boot. But limine is more lightweight and still just does the job perfectly fine, so I'm going to go with that one. You can enable unified kernel images if you want to. Select your host name, then put the password for the root account, and your user account, and a user. Now this is not the full name for the user like we've seen before. Just do preferably all lowercase, and just, yeah, the username should be all lowercase letters with hyphens, preferably, so just enter that. The password for that account. Then you should select whether they want to be able to run commands as root using sudo. For most people, you'd just be able to hit yes, then confirm and exit, then profile, type, then there's minimal server, xorg, but for most people, you're going to want to go with desktop. And you'll see environment type, it either says desktop environment or window manager. Unless you really want to know, or unless you really do know what you're doing, just don't select anything if it says window manager, only select the ones that say desktop environment. So Budgie is Windows-like, Cinnamon is also Windows-like, Cutefish is Mac-like but also kind of buggy from my experience with it. Deepin is also pretty buggy. Enlightenment is a desktop environment. Enlightenment is one of them where it says it's a window manager, but it's also a desktop environment. Then GNOME or GNOME is Mac-like. Hyperland is very lightweight and very customizable, so I would recommend this one even though it's a bit more advanced. KDE Plasma is the one that I absolutely recommend, just because it's Windows-like and also by far the most customizable. LXQT is designed to be lightweight. Mate or Mate is another kind of lightweight one. And XFCE4 is also lightweight. And the others I don't have much experience with, but you can try them if you want. So I would just recommend KDE Plasma if you're not sure. Then the drivers for your graphics card. Then you can either do all open source if you're not sure. AMD, Intel, NVIDIA open source, or the other NVIDIA open source. VirtualBox, there used to be VMware, but that one just broke for some reason, or proprietary NVIDIA. So if you have an NVIDIA card, I would just do NVIDIA proprietary, because that's the most likely to work best. But if not, either do all open source, or just select the vendor for your graphics card or CPU. So for me, it would be Intel, then Greta. SDDM is the most customizable, LY has no mouse cursor support, but it's the most lightweight. The two light DDM options are also pretty lightweight and still look pretty good. And GDM, I just don't like GDM because not only is it not customizable at all, but it's also very slow. So unless you're using GNOME and GNOME by itself, you can use GDM. But otherwise, I would recommend any of the others, but I'm going to go with SDDM. And then audio, you can choose either one of these audio services. I would recommend Pipewire over Pulse Audio, but I'm just not going to do either. Then your kernel, you can either do regular Linux, which should be fine for most people, Linux hardened, Linux long-term support, or Linux Zen. And then network configuration, you can either automatically copy your current network configuration to the installation, configure it manually, or use a network manager, which I would recommend for most users as it lets you configure internet graphically. Then additional packages, I'm not going to do any additional packages just to save time, but I will put up the list of packages that I usually install on the screen now. Pause it and read it if you want. Then your time zone, it says the region followed by the sub-region. So for me, I'm going to go up until I get to Europe and London, since that's the nearest time zone to me. And then automatic time sync, if you don't know what you're doing with that, I just enable it, but you can disable it if you want. And then you can either save your configuration to a file, or just carry on with the installation if you're happy with your settings. Then the specified configuration will be applied. Would you like to continue? Then formatting the disk in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now it will just be a bunch of text on the screen, and because of that, I would like to issue a photosensitive warning for this installation in particular, because it might get a bit flashy depending on how fast the text is going, and it will be at 100 times speed. But yeah, this is basically just most of the installation, just progress bars as it installs the packages and configures everything. Then once it's done, it says installation completed. What would you like to do next? Now either you can go back to the command line, change root into your installation environment with the command line for post-installation configurations, or reboot the system. So for Arch Linux specifically, I happen to have just written a post-install script that will install recommended settings. I'll show you how to download it off GitHub, and you can edit it to suit your needs if you want, but I'll just go through that now. So yeah, this is the Limine boot menu. And this is the default SDDM look. And now, if you just enter your password, and then again, because I'm using the capture card, it asks me which screen I want to use. So I'm going to skip the walkthrough because we've seen it multiple times. And now I'm going to go up to the search and see if it installed console. So yeah, you can either press Ctrl or F3 to switch to a terminal or just open a terminal app. But first, I'm going to have to reconnect to the internet because it doesn't save over from the install media. So I'm going to have to reconnect to my Wi-Fi network, so I'll do that real quick. Done. And now, in console, I'm going to type git. Actually, I'm going to do sudo pacman-sy git, and then just type the password for your account for sudo, and then it'll install the necessary packages. And then once you're sure that git is installed, let me clear the screen, you're going to want to type git clone https://github.com/Jared Dinosaur with the correct capitalization /JDAP. Then you can change directory into JDAP, and then if you list, there's the the post-install script that I wrote, and then I don't know if nano is installed on here. If it is, you can just edit it to do what you want, but this is what it does by default. So if I press Ctrl-X to exit and do python jdap.py, then it runs the script, and I wrote the warnings such that it says the script won't work without an internet connection, and you need to run the script as a user with sudo privileges, not the root user itself though, because it causes some bugs when installing Yay. And then you can enter ready to run the script or anything else to quit, and then it lets you edit the Pacman configuration, so you can edit all of these. And then what I like to do is enable color. You can disable the progress bar if you want, set the number of parallel downloads. I'm going to set the number of parallel downloads to 1, just for extra stability on my Wi-Fi. And if you haven't already, you can enable different optional repositories. So once you've finished editing, press Ctrl-X to exit, Y to save changes, and then Enter again to save changes. Then you can, if you installed Grub or Limewire as your boot mode, then you can edit the config file, and since I installed Limewire, I'll edit the config for that. And it generated the config file in a different location for me. So instead, I'm just going to Ctrl-X out of it. And then, in case you just downloaded it directly from GitHub using a web browser, or transferred it from a USB, then it reinstalls Git, and then it installs Yay, the secondary package manager. So once you've entered your password, if you're not sure what to do, just press enter anytime it asks you to confirm something, and it should just do everything automatically. And now it copies all the files from the AUR or Arch Linux user repository to install Yay. And there is one of them which just takes quite a while, which is the last one. It enters the fake root environment, then asks you for your password a third time, then installs the packages, and then this is just the list of my recommended packages that I showed on the screen earlier. You can install these if you want, so I am going to. And then once it's done that, it will say script complete. If you want, you can restart just to ensure extra stability, but if not, you can just continue on with your brand new installation. You can see one of the packages installed, Firefox, pinned itself to the taskbar automatically. And yeah, that is Arch Linux and the post-install script. On to the next expert distro. Okay, Slackware. This is my third attempt recording this. Call it a skill issue if you want, but Slackware is just stupid to install, so I wouldn't recommend doing it unless you really want to. Anyway, so once you've booted into the installation media, the password is live, all lowercase. Then make sure that you have your disk formatted like this using the KDE partition manager with roughly these partition sizes. Then you can open this thing that says install Slackware, enter the password live, skip partitioning because you've already done it. Set up your target partitions, select this one. Do not format it because it already has been formatted. Then install Slackware to disk. Then it will say it looks like you're good to go if you have enough free space. Then it has to process 19 Slackware live modules, which usually, from my experience, takes a stupidly long time. So I will wait for it to do that. Then, once it's finally done, which took so long that the live environment fell asleep, then you can create your account, full name, your login name, your user ID and your shell if you want to change them, your password, the password for the root account, then okay. Would you like to protect the system with a basic firewall? No. Then you can either install the traditional Linux loader or the EFI one. I'm going to do the EFI one. Install the ESP. Install the boot menu entry. You can configure your network. Enter your host name. Enter the domain name, which you can just leave as blank. Apparently you can't, so you can just make one up. And then some networks require a VLAN ID. No. Use Network Manager. Yes. Settings accepted. Then you can select the service to start up. You can read what all of these do, but I'm going to leave it as a default because I cannot be bothered to set it up after everything I've just done to get it to work. Then you can select whether your hardware clock is set to UTC or local time. Then select your time zone. Then you can select whatever one to choose your default EX or VI editor. I'm just going to go with the default. Configuration is now complete. You may now exit and reboot. I really hope this worked and I didn't mess up the ESP, because if not, oh dear. And finally, after about half an hour of pain, wrong password, I thought it was the live environment. After half an hour of pain, which you guys luckily won't have to experience, because I've just told you how to do it correctly, that is Slackware installed. Although, why would you? I could show you how to set up the package manager, which not only is very bad, but also requires a bunch of commands that take ages to complete, so you can just Google how to do that. But onto the final distro of this video, and the final expert distro, which will not be anywhere near as much of a pain to install. And our final distro of the video, and final expert distro, is Void, and also the final one I have to issue a jump scare warning for, because it's another one that beeps when you boot into it, which makes a coin sound. And then there's a bunch of options, but most people will want to just boot into this one. Then it shows you the 2 users available to log in. So I'm going to log in as root with the password void Linux. And then what you're just going to do is type void -installer. Welcome to the void Linux installation. Set the system keyboard layout. UK. Set up the network. This one. Then enter the SSID for your network. Then the encryption type, which is WEP if it has no password, and WPA if it does have a password. Then the password for it. Then it initializes the network. Network is working properly. Then set the source installation. You can either do local or network, but I'm going to do local. Select XBPS mirror, which is the package manager it uses. Now, there aren't as many as the other installations, so I would just do the one that is closest to you, which for me would be, well, either the one that's closest to you or the one that's fastest. So I'm just going to go with the one at the top. Do you want to continue? Yes. Then the host name, which I'm just going to put as void. Set the system locale, which for me is ENGB. Set the time zone. It asks you to select the region. The root password. Your user account, enter a primary login name. And like Arch, this has to be all lowercase with either all lowercase letters or hyphens as well. And then the display name, which can just be whatever you want. Then enter the password. Then you can select the group membership. Important, include it in wheel if you wanted to be able to run commands as root. But yeah, I'm just going to leave this as default. And bootloader, select the disk to install the bootloader on. Use a graphical terminal for the bootloader, yes. Partition the disks. This one. Then it takes you into the partition manager, and I already have my partition set correctly, so I'm just going to quit. File systems, and then this one I will format as ext4 and mount it as the root, yes. And then this one I will format as FAT32 /boot/EFI instead of just /boot. There we go, done. And then install with save changes. Do you want to continue? Yes. And now it just barrels along with the installer, which shouldn't take too long considering this is a quite minimal distro, but now you just have to wait. Then you can select the services to enable on boot. I'm just going to leave it as the default. Then, Void Linux has been installed successfully. Do you want to reboot the system? You can either go back to the command line interface or reboot. And then it gives you a boot menu. And then you can log in as the user that you set up or as root, and I can't type today, with the password, and I would show you how to set up a GUI environment, but unfortunately I don't have time for that. If it gets enough requests, I could do that in a later video, but yeah, that is the final distro, and that is the end of this video. If you found any of these helpful, please like, subscribe, comment, whatever you feel like, and thanks for watching.